Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Talking about our favorite albums containing riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, is the great Baldini, the great Bald Hope, Dylan Adams. Dylan, how are you doing today, buddy?
Doing great, man. I was really excited about this warm February weather we were having, and we're back to these like kind of Arctic winter weather again. So,
Full spring.
Yeah, it's that early spring.
It's still a little bit frigid up here in the north, but I am excited to get into this episode today. Some of you who have listened to the show in the past may know that we did kind of a trilogy of sorts. Based on a specific region of the country, a specific musician of sorts as well. Definitely a riff disciple, a worshiper of the riff, a guy who knows his way around a good riff. I am, of course, talking about Sammy Duet of Goatwhore. Sammy, how are you doing today, man?
I'm making my way around a good whiff.
A whiff, yeah.
Yeah, a whiff.
I almost had it. Man.
I mean, a whiff. I mean, it's hard to pass up a good whiff. We were speaking about canes earlier. I had a pretty good whiff of some canes earlier.
Hell yeah, man! Ain't nothing wrong with that. Got to take it all in. I guess I want to touch on first. You just came off of your trip to NAMM. How was it, man? How'd you enjoy your little vacation, your little stay at NAMM?
It was cool. It was interesting. It was like the first night. The second night. I got there on the Wednesday. And basically just hung out. And then the Thursday there was or was it the Wednesday? I was there for like 5 days, dude.
Oh, wow.
But either the first night or the second night, I can't recall. There was some kind of like induction, like this heavy metal induction thing that they were inducting Sacred Reich into like the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame or somebody's Heavy Metal Hall of Fame. So I walk into the venue that this is happening and all that, and there's like a band playing and everybody's singing at tables and having dinner and all this shit. It was the weirdest shit. I'm like, all right, this ain't exactly for me, so I'm just going to go and roam around for a little bit. And the first person I run into is Steve Zing from Samhain.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
I'm like, hey, man, how have you been? I was like, I'm not glad to see you because it was a little strange scenario I was in there.
It kind of seems like one of those things, you often hear of guys going on tour and being able to hang out and see old friends. But this definitely seems like it almost seems just like an old like veterans hall of like old army buddies getting in together and kind of hanging out for a good chunk of the week.
Yeah, it's cool. But the first day or two, but then after you see all the cool shit, because I'm a gear nerd. Like I love amps, I love pedals, I love guitars, and unfortunately this year, some of the bigger companies that I was looking forward to seeing some of the new products, and some of these companies make like one-off custom shop stuff for like just the NAMM show. They weren't there, and it was like I was looking forward to actually seeing these magical instruments that you see on the internet that you never see in real life, to actually see them, and the companies that make them weren't there this year. So that was a huge bummer. So the first day I was there, I pretty much saw everything that I wanted to see, and after that I was like, all right, I'm ready to get the fuck out of here, but I can't. So it was off to the ESP booth to bug them.
How long have you been going to NAMM for?
This was my first year, actually.
Really? Okay, interesting.
Wow, okay.
As your first kind of time here, like what does a day for you look like? Are you kind of meeting with people? Are you kind of talking about your signature model or maybe some of the pickups that you might use? Like what kind of goes into that when you're like, working with these companies for so long and now you're here at NAMM?
Saturday was my work day, so to speak, and I had to do some interviews with Seymour Duncan and then ESP, of course, had a bunch of questions they wanted to film and stuff, and I did a signing at Erected Cabinets.
Okay.
So that was the whole reason I was there, was basically to knock all that stuff out.
I guess I can't really ask you what it was like before, but maybe if you've talked to some of your friends that have been going there a long time, did they kind of speak on maybe what's changed over the years, maybe like from back in the day to perhaps like now, or, you know, you've been a gearhead, as you said, for a long time. Do you notice some of the trends that are maybe happening in the industry? Do you see that around NAMM when you're kind of looking around? Is it, you know, anything that you particularly notice?
One thing I really noticed was like what I was talking about earlier. You know, they had these companies, which I'm not really going to name, but that weren't there with their products, and they just had like a little office to where you went in and grabbed the card, or if you were a dealer, you wanted to get in touch with somebody, you went in and talked to them. But there was like, they weren't like exhibiting any products or any of the crazy shit that they normally do every year, you know. That's one thing that I noticed, is a lot of these companies, bigger companies, kind of scaled it back massively, you know. But and the flip side of the coin, I was talking to people that had recently been like the last couple of years to NAMM, and they said that like this year was like the biggest one so far since COVID, you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's definitely making a comeback. So maybe next year I'll get to see some sick guitars.
Yeah.
Not to say that I didn't see some sick guitars, but there were some sick guitars I was looking forward to seeing that I did.
It definitely seems like the way gear is rolling out now is a little bit different too. With I've definitely looked at like Sweetwater, Musician's Friend, and all of those post NAMM to see all of those new models get released, or you see like, you know, in particular the ESP videos that'll get released of like all of the new models that are being released post NAMM or anything like that. And it definitely seems like a lot of the newer models are being released like kind of sporadically, like throughout the year, as opposed to one lump release earlier in the year.
Yeah, it's, you know, working with ESP, they're explaining to me a lot of things that, especially this year, like it's hard for them to actually get, like they were getting the 2022 models in last year, you know, and they were releasing the 2023 models, and the 22 models weren't even in stock yet, you know, because of the whole supply chain is just screwed, you know. So I think that's why, you know, this year they kind of scaled back on like the actual ESP and E2 stuff, and they focused more on the LTD stuff. And the stuff they did release this year is just fucking like, it counts, you know. It might not be much, but the stuff that they did release this year is like phenomenal, you know. Instead of releasing like a shit ton of stuff, they just focused in, rather than, you know, some kids waiting on a guitar since fucking 2022 and never received a guitar yet because it's never been in stock, you know. But enough of all that business talk. Let's talk about some cool shit.
Hell yeah. Well, one question we like to ask our guests is that, you know, obviously you are a person who has been listening to riffs for the majority of their life. You've been writing riffs most of your life. You've probably heard a lot of bad riffs, but what makes a good riff? What to you makes a good, just solid riff?
Something that catches your attention immediately, right? Whether it be something fancy with a million notes, or it be a riff with two notes. It's what you have to feel it, kind of. You'll know when it's right when you hear it. You know, and I mean, and it goes for the person as well. You know, there's some riffs that I love that you would probably be like, man, that's the worst riff I've ever heard in my life. But, you know, the whole riff thing. But on that note, when it's a good riff, it's across the board a good fucking riff. You know what I'm saying?
Can you think of maybe a moment where you knew, like maybe those first initial riffs where you kind of like, that's different. That's like, you know, we've all had moments where we probably listened to music that our parents had on the radio or what have you. But then there was a moment where it's like, what the fuck is that? Like, I got to know what that is. Like, do you remember some of those initial riffs?
Oh yes, absolutely. Almost every riff off the first Black Sabbath record when I was a kid
Absolutely.
scared the living shit out of me, but I knew that shit was cool.
Yeah.
You know, that album definitely was definitely was the album that was like, man, I don't know what this guy's doing, but I got to figure out how to do this too. Another one would probably be Judas Priest Point of Entry.
Okay, interesting
That
choice. Yeah.
That was the first Judas Priest album I actually really heard all the way through. You know, I'd heard bits and pieces, and I never really absorbed it until I heard that record. I was like, oh shit, I get it now. You know,
dude, I think there's some jams on that, like Desert Plains. Not speaking of a riff. Yeah.
Speaking of, my God, that fucking opening riff, man, that's a fucking riff, Jack.
Yeah, you know? Hell yeah, dude.
There are riffs like fucking KK down in Glib Tipton's throwing that shit out like fucking shredded cheese, you know? There's just riffs everywhere on that album, man. It's fucking amazing.
Both of those guys, I mean, they're no slouches, but I think for me personally, especially like learning something like one of my first records of all time was British Steel. And so like learning something as rudimentary, but as powerful, because it doesn't, like you said, I mean, it could be crazy, it could be simple. Like I loved playing along to Grinder, like something like Grinder is just like so heavy from that record or something like that. But I totally am with you on that.
Yeah. I mean, even still to this day, that fucking riff in Grinder is still fucking heavy as shit.
Yeah.
I mean, you play that riff exactly like they played it, but with a little bit more of a distorted amp.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe tune it down a cunt hair. It's fucking massive, man. Still to this day. That is an example of across the board good riff.
Do you remember perhaps seeing some of these riffs live for the first time? Like, what was your first show that you ever went to?
Oh my God, man! I was a fucking child. Okay. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. It was on the Kiss Rock and Roll Over tour.
Man, we're gonna be good buddies, man. That's some of my first concerts ever. But the Rock and Roll Over tour.
Yes, and it was Kiss and Blackfoot in New Orleans.
Wow!
And my mom took me to go see it. Okay,
that's awesome.
So my mother's carrying me. Okay, at this, I mean, I could walk around, but dude, it was like fucking chaos. You know what I'm saying? So she has me on her shoulder, just holding me, trying to get into the venue and stuff. And for some reason, they were behind schedule or something like that by opening the doors. So it's this massive, crowd of people. It's just people get crushed waiting to get in. She has me, and she's holding me. I'm just like looking around, like what the fuck is going on? There was a guy behind me smoking a joint, burning me with the joint. Okay, because he's like wobbling, and I remember he's just like sorry, and he's like accidentally burning me with this joint. Then there's a guy, I'll never forget this as long as I live. There was a guy on the side of me that was just fucking wasted out of his mind. And he had like a butane lighter. So he would fill his mouth up with butane and try to blow fire with it, trying to act like Gene Simmons. And this guy is like, he's so fucked up that he had to be inhaling the butane because he was just like fucking like, dude, it was insanity. And this is before the concert started.
That's insane. You never stood a chance, man. You were always primed for this life. It was meant to be.
I survived it, you know. I lived to tell the tale.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of the first time we saw Goatwhore, Dylan. Where
oh man,
it was we barely knew each other. This was back in what, like
2014.
2014
release date.
I guess it would have technically been the release date for the album. We lived in Bowling Green, just north of Nashville. Dylan was dating someone at the time with a child, and she grabbed his glasses and broke them in half. So he can't see at all. I'm new. I'm from the Chicagoland area, so I just moved to Kentucky, and he's like, "We're going to see Goatwhore tonight, but you have to direct me." And I've never really been to Nashville, so we're like yelling at each other. It's raining, and he's like trying to find the exit in, and we made it, and to see that album played live on the release date. I don't even know if you guys even had an opener for that date or not, but it may have just been a one-off thing.
I remember that show, the Acid. Yes, there was no opening band. It was just us.
Yeah.
I heard it was the weirdest shit.
Yeah. It was a good time.
Yes.
Loved it.
I love that place though, man. That place is fantastic. I love playing that place.
That whole block, it looks a lot different now than from that date of that show, but I mean, they still got that venue, and then the venue across the street, the End, is like definitely the hub, I guess, for Nashville for sure.
I don't want to play the End ever again.
No,
it's just so. We played there once with like Ringworm.
Oh yeah,
okay.
And they shouldn't have put that show there.
Because
I mean, the place holds like fucking 25 people. But there's a new place that we played recently out there called the Cobra, I believe.
That's it.
Yeah.
That place, top notch.
Yeah.
That place is my new favorite place besides the Exit in Nashville.
Well, it was actually really good to see you on this most recent tour. I caught you at Reggie's, with Withered and is it Spider?
Yes.
Loved. I was not familiar with those bands. Loved seeing them live. I love how like it seemed like each city there was a spot for like kind of like a local band as well. Awesome. Had the best time. This album seems kind of like a long time coming. It's been like 5 years, and then of course with the lockdown and everything, I'm sure you were itching to get back out there and play. Now that it's kind of winding down and you kind of are maybe looking to something new in the future, how does it feel? Like, how did it feel to get it out? How did it feel to get it, playing the album like on a tour fully?
It was definitely a relief because, I mean, like you said, how can I put this? I put a lot into this record, like a lot.
Yeah.
Which was cool because I had a lot of times to really think about the songs themselves. Rather than in the past, it was like tour as much as possible. All right, bust out a record real quick so we could go back on tour as much as possible. So, I mean, there was always spots, on those records that I'm not saying they're terrible records by any means, anything, but there was always that one or two songs in that one spot. It was like, man, if I could have just had like another month, I could have really made the song better. But that happens. Unfortunately, I'm my own worst critic, I guess you could say. So I take it really hard when I hear it, and I'm like, man, I could have did this, I could have did that after the fact and whatever. But what do they say? Art is never finished; it's always just abandoned. But this last record, I had a lot of time to really think about every minuscule aspect of this record because I was forced to have nothing to do but work on the record. I triple checked and triple guessed myself many times on this record, and I have to say with this record, as far as like the songwriting goes, this is the happiest I've been, definitely. But as far as getting out there and playing them live, that was another feat in itself. Because there was a lot of, how can I say, there was a lot of experimental stuff guitar-wise that I did that I never really messed with in the past. And I was like, how the hell am I going to pull this off with one guitar? But, cheating. Who cheating? You cheat live.
I loved hearing it. Yeah. I mean, with Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven, especially in kind of, that initial part of like lockdown, is everyone located in the same city? Is everyone living within like the New Orleans or Louisiana area?
No, me and Ben were the only two living here at the time.
Okay. So how does something like, are you recording some? I mean, obviously technology has kind of allowed for us to maybe share things a little bit easier. So with the process in lockdown, are you just kind of rifling through some riffs or parts and sending them off to, Zach or Ben, or how's that working?
What I normally do is I get a structure of an entire song, like that I feel is 90, 80% done. And I'll just record it really quick here with like with Easy Drummer or whatever. And just get a rough version of the song, and I'll just send it out to like Ben and Zach and TA, and just say, what do you guys think about this? And sometimes they'll be like, that's pretty good. We could work this, we could work that. Or sometimes they'll be like, stop fucking with it. It's good. I know how you are. Leave it alone. Or they'll be like, that's trash, but this riff is really good, so we could use that. But I mean, it's not like I get butthurt about it. I mean, it's for the best of the song. A lot of people get upset when you tell them that sometimes their riff's not so good. We can't hit home runs every time. But that's basically how it works. It's like I just try to get as much of the song finished as I possibly can. That way, because Zach lives in Arizona and TA lives in Texas. So it's not like we could just go, hey guys, let's go jam real quick and this weekend. It's a big deal getting these guys down here. So I try to get as much of the bulk of the song finished as I can before they get here. That way they'll listen to it, they'll learn it, and we'll just start jamming it. And while they're here, we'll just kind of make adjustments as we go.
I want to transition into maybe some questions about our trilogy. We recorded a trilogy. We kind of touched on several albums we felt like kind of best represented the scene that you're from, and 3 albums that you all happen to be on. We were big fans.
It was just a coincidence, right?
Just a coincidence.
Just a coincidence.
Right. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. We really like these 3 albums. These really kind of stick out to us when we think of like New Orleans and the quote unquote sludge metal scene. But Dylan, I'm gonna let you take this one first, because this was technically an album that you picked. You were like, we have to pick this Goatwhore record in particular. And was it just because it was like the first one you owned, or your introduction to the band?
It was my introduction to the band. I was around when the second iteration of Headbangers Ball was still on, when Jamey was still hosting it. So like I saw the Black and Sun Cult video constantly. Like it was just like every Saturday night at whatever time it was, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, it was just like blaring on. So like at 16 years old, 15 years old, however it was at the point, like hearing that track just constantly and seeing that, was it a David Brodsky video?
Yeah.
Seeing that video, seeing how the color scheme was of the video, and just like, okay, like I've heard these earlier records I'm really into. I've heard like these Lamb of God records. I've heard like the Pantera records. That was around the same time frame I got into like Cannibal Corpse. So like hearing all this like really hyper aggressive shit at one point was just, it just sunk into me and like sold me on that. And hearing that full record at 16 and then going, okay, whatever this band puts out, I have to now listen to. And like took a trip backwards a little bit, found some of the earlier stuff, really enjoyed it. And, that was kind of my first foray into like black metal as well, was like getting something that was, as raw as you could get at that time for me. And then going, okay, what does this band's influences sound like? What's Celtic Frost? What's, the Norwegian scene? And moving forward. So with each record that came out after that, I was just hooked at this point.
All right, so let me ask you a question really quick.
Okay.
And this is a fun little fact now that we're talking about the Headbangers Ball and Mr. Jamey Jasta and such. Did you see the episode where me and Ben were on there talking about Alchemy of the Black Sun Cult?
I tried to find this. I'm a little younger than Dylan, so like I would have probably missed it, but I tried to find this fucking thing. I seen a picture of you guys, all 3 of you in the room, but I don't know if Dylan, did you ever catch that episode?
You know what? I may not have.
So you guys didn't see it?
No, I haven't. I missed it.
It was a fun little fact. So it was on like national television, you know what I'm saying? It was when Headbangers Ball was big and everywhere. And I was wearing this shirt that nobody caught. This is a fun little fact for you, that it was a Destroyer 666 of Women, Wolves, and War. Okay? Yeah. It was this EP they released. And the cover of the EP is a wolf having sex with a woman in all its explicit glory. Guess who wore the shirt on Headbangers Ball?
Oh,
And they did
perfect.
not. They did not censor it. A wolf penis going into a woman's vagina, straight up on the Headbangers Ball.
Dylan, I wonder why we can't find this episode anywhere. That's so crazy.
Couldn't even imagine it.
But I didn't realize I was wearing the shirt until after the episode, where I looked down and we were leaving. I was like, nobody said anything. Cool.
Which, and I'm sure it came as, because you could edit a little bit, right? Like, I'm sure you could blur it out. They just didn't do it, huh?
It's really hard to catch, but I knew it was there.
Yeah, you knew. So when we posted this episode in particular, we actually got a comment from the bass player on that record, Nate. And he said, he was kind of talking briefly, just commented on the time of recording that record. It was crazy time recording the album. He mentioned it wasn't an album that was recorded to a click. There was no pre-production recording. It was just a wild time. And so with your first album for a new label, you got some new members in the band. What do you remember most about the process going into A Haunting Curse?
We were about halfway done writing the songs, and Hurricane Katrina hit. So that put a big dampener on a lot of shit, and all our stuff was in lockdown because of the hurricane, and a practice room here in New Orleans because the hurricane, like, they just basically shut the fucking city down. And one day they were like, "Hey, you're not going to be able to get in the practice room for a while. So if y'all want to come grab whatever you need to get it out, now's the time to do it." So basically, we just grabbed all our gear out of our rehearsal room here and drove it all to Arizona, where Zach lives. And he found the practice room out there. We would just go out there for like a month every once in a while and just write. And Arizona's a very different place than Louisiana. That's what I remember. I remember that very clearly. It was a kind of a, how can I say it? Just, I guess because I've lived here for so long that I never really got to explore other places like on a long basis. Like, when you're on tour, you're in the city, you're there for a couple of hours, and then you're out. You don't really get to experience the culture of the city or anything like that. To where in Arizona, we were there for like a month at a time, several times. So getting to experience that was interesting, to say the least. I definitely figured out that I'm not meant for dry heat at all. I'm not meant for the desert. Desert's not my jam, man.
Well, it's wild to you mentioned going out where Zach was. Had you known him very long? Like, he joined maybe like a couple years before. Was he still like a teenager by that point?
He was like 18 by that point. Yes.
Yeah. So you just like, are you coming over? Is he like still living with his like parents or something? You hanging out?
He was still living with his dad. It's like, yeah, well, we're coming over, man, with all the shit. But luckily, we had another friend of ours that lived there that he runs his own business and stuff like that. And he had this huge house with like a bunch of bedrooms and stuff. He was like, just, you guys could stay with me. Don't worry about it. Here's your bedroom. Here's Ben's bedroom, yada, yada, yada. So we just basically stayed with an old friend of mine instead of, going crash Zach's parents' house,
Just sketty dinners and, hanging out, man.
It's like, what do we talk about without sounding too crazy in front of his parents,
So you're rehearsing out in Arizona. How long did it take until you're able to actually like go in and record?
We finished up a bunch of the songs while we were in Arizona. Then finally, it was okay for us to come back to Louisiana and get our practice room back. So we finished like maybe 2 or 3 more songs there and just rehearsed the hell out of them. And then went in the studio and went for it. As far as a timeline, I can't really remember, It was just kind of like go time,
Yeah, I feel it. You've slept since then, so I understand. You know, how did you exactly get hooked up with Erik Rutan?
Actually, Ben did a couple of Soylent Green records with him.
That's right.
And he was like, trust me. Because I wasn't sure who I wanted to work with on the next record. And then Ben had brought up the idea of going and work with Erik. And I was like, well, let's see what happens, you know?
With, you know, how does he compare to maybe like, you know, your Spike Cassidy or, you know, Kurt Ballou or you know, or Jarrett Pritchard? Like, how does he different in the studio versus some of the other producers or engineers that you've worked with?
Erik is very adamant about your performance.
That's good.
And when I say very adamant about your performance, is saying that you better have your shit together as tight as possible, or you risk getting your head kicked in. he's almost like the fucking Phil Spector of death metal, you know?
Oh man, I've heard the drill sergeant term used quite a bit with him, like a lot.
Well, those videos are so great with the, you know, you always see the behind the scenes music videos that Metal Blade will put out, and he's just like, go, go, go. Like,
yeah, he's not fucking around. I mean, I have to give it to him as well, because he, from that experience, making that record with him made me a better guitarist. Awesome. Because he will point out your fucking weaknesses, and he'll be like, you suck at this, you suck at that, you need to work on this, go in the next room, come back in an hour, and you better have it together.
I guess you you know, you weren't strayed from working with him after that, you know, knowing how he can be in the studio. I mean, you went back for several releases. I wonder, you know, what did you learn from that process initially, and did it, you know, has it persisted? Like, from what you learned from that, you know, recording and writing experience with The Haunting Curse, you know, what have you learned from Erik that has maybe stayed into the present day of working in Goatwhore?
Like I said, just being as proficient on your instrument as you possibly can when it's go time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, I didn't want to go with him initially. I didn't want to go back with him on Carving Out the Eyes of God, to be honest with you, because we had so many issues with the guitar rig and the guitar and stuff that I have a specific tone that I like to get. And I'm not saying he wasn't willing to get that tone, but we're on such a short schedule when we were recording A Haunting Curse that he was just like, hurry up and plug into this amp. I know it sounds good, and we'll just crack it with that. But then I was like, well, I don't use that. I use Randalls. At the time, I was using Randalls. So I wasn't really stoked about the guitar tone on that record. So when it came down to doing Carving Out the Eyes of God, I was like, I'm not sure if I want to go back to this guy if it's going to be like this again, because I want to get my guitar sound, you know? And he was like, look, I don't care what it takes. We're going to use your guitar sound. We're going to use your amp. We're going to use your guitar. I want to do this record with you guys. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I was like, all right, here it is. Let's see what you got. And there he captured that beautiful, beautiful guitar sound you hear on Carving Out the Eyes of God. He exceeded my expectations on that one as far as the guitar tone goes. Yes.
The other thing we kind of notated in this particular episode that maybe I wanted to maybe get out of you a little bit was that you toured the hell out of it. I mean, was this perhaps like the longest touring cycle that you did? Like, was this, or was there maybe another album where you were out on the road longer? I mean, it seemed like you released the record and then you just stayed out on the road forever.
We did a lot of shit on that record. I want to say the only one that we did more touring on than that record was maybe Blood for the Master.
Okay.
Because I think for Blood for the Master, for a year, we were home for maybe, I want to say, Jesus Christ, maybe 2 months.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And Blood for the Master was busy. Like that was insane. But I remember, yeah, Haunting Curse, we did a lot of touring, but I think Blood for the Master topped it. It was just non-fucking stop for Blood for the Master.
Well, I mean, some of the touring lineups or packages that you were a part of, I mean, you played with some pretty pivotal groups that I imagine that influenced you, maybe bands that you had a lot of respect for, just to name a few. I mean, Emperor, High on Fire, Celtic Frost, Venom, some dates with Sun. You were even on Cattle Decapitation's first headlining tour that year as well.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember maybe some of the experiences that you had with, I don't know, maybe like Tom Warrior or Matt Pike or, Travis Ryan being, with those guys?
Man, well, of course, Celtic Frost is like my favorite band of all time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember we had it was either the Emperor dates or the Venom dates. And the Celtic Frost dates were all in the same time frame, basically. So it was like, okay, get ready to go tour with Emperor. Then I get to spend some time with Venom. Then I get to tour with Celtic Frost. And I was like, what is real? It's just really fucking happening. It was like those three tours just like were like bam, 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 like immediately one after the other. To where I was like, what the fuck is happening right now? It's like, what next? We got Slayer. We tour with Slayer next. What's happening?
Yeah, I'd have to imagine like a 16-year-old, Sammy would just be like mind blown, man.
Yeah, one of the best moments on the Celtic Frost tour, I'll never forget this. We were playing at a place called Pops in Sauget, Illinois.
Okay.
And it was just us and Celtic Frost, I believe, and maybe a local band. And we were sound checking. And we sound checked with the song Alchemy of the Black Sun Cult. And they had like a bunch of like bleachers in the back. It was a pretty big place. So we stopped the song, and I hear from the balcony, I should have copyrighted that. And I look up, and it's fucking Tom G. Warren.
Perfect.
I'm like, I will take that as a compliment, sir.
And that would have been on, I don't know if that was the last tour cycle that Celtic Frost did or not. That was for the Monotheist record, obviously.
Yes, I think they did one tour after that with like Typo Negative in the US.
That's right. I do remember that one now.
Yeah. But yeah, that was towards the end of Celtic Frost. Yeah, unfortunately.
Even those like Emperor dates, I don't think they were back in the States till like last year, if I'm not mistaken. Like it'd been a while since they'd been here in the United States. So, I mean, some pretty incredible stuff. I maybe want to shift gears into perhaps our Acid Bath episode. One thing in particular that really helped us out in doing research was like the Acid Bath archive is just so full of information. And like, I don't know how even whoever runs that page is able to access like all of these things, these old tapes that you would have thought disintegrated with time. How do they find that stuff? Is it from your like personal collection, or are they getting in touch with people?
It's this guy named Josh that does it. And I guess he's like a younger gentleman. So he doesn't really have a job or anything. I think he's still really young. So all he does is try to track all this shit down however he can,
Is there anything, I'm sure it's a constant surprise, but has there been anything on the page where you're like, how the fuck did he get that? Like anything
all the fucking time. I'm like, how the fuck did you find that?
It's just constant. Like I can't believe so much of this exists, which is great. This band that, it's the legacy and kind of the mystery of this band for so long. You maybe didn't have a lot of information before, but you kind of coming on here and doing interviews or doing your live streams and all of this footage has kind of opened up the world to like maybe some of the information on that band. How do you feel about the legacy of this band kind of now over like several years and in the modern age, now that all of everybody can kind of check this record out that wasn't even available on streaming up until like a couple years ago at this point?
Yeah, it's very surreal how now it's probably bigger than the band's ever been now than it was when we were together. It's crazy how it kind of worked out. I mean, I guess better late than never, you know. But yeah, it's real strange how that worked out. You know, back then, you know, I remember touring and stuff and playing to like fucking 3 people a night. And nobody really gave a shit, you know. And then all of a sudden, it's like this big deal now. It's like, oh, okay. I guess it all was for something, you know.
You know, it's remarkable too that like when a record comes out, you know, almost 30 years ago, right? 94, yeah, 93, 94.
Yes, Kite String Pops is the anniversary is this year. Yes, 30th anniversary.
Yeah. And it's wild.
I'm not going to say anything about that. So yeah, I'm just saying it's the 30th anniversry of Kite String this year.
Interesting.
Just saying. Just
there we go.
saying.
Yeah, you didn't hear it here.
Yes, you heard it here.
But it is kind of, because I remember hearing that record for the first time in like 08, 09, right before I moved to the Tennessee area. And I just had a friend named Joey that was like, hey man, wreak havoc on my hard drive, take anything you've never heard, put it on a disc, take it with you, you're going to love it. And that's the first time I heard that record. It was like, I'd never heard of it, couldn't find anything else out about the band. I remember I saw like a promo photo. I saw you and was like, there's a connection. Like, you know, I know Sammy's in Goatwhore, so like there's the connection there. And just hearing that and kind of being blown away at how different it was from what Goatwhore was at that time, and being able to go, okay, this is like an amalgamation of like kind of Alice in Chains-esque stuff, meeting like some early 90s death metal and just like this blending of all these other extreme sounds, and just going, okay, this is a really interesting band that I had no clue about. Because how I would get into stuff back then was like, I'd read about it. I'd read like Terrorizer magazine or like Metal Edge, or like, you know, I'd buy like a book that Decibel talked about or anything like that to just learn more. And I'd buy records just off the whim of it. So having that opportunity to hear about a band that I thought at that point no one really knew about was great.
Not a whole lot of people knew about the band while we were together, unfortunately, you know? And, you know, it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, with that first record, it's essentially like all of the, like a culmination of the demos that came before it, like all the songs that you had at that point. You just kind of,
yeah, we just like, well, we're putting it, this is everything we have, and we're recording everything. And I don't remember initially if it was our plan to actually put all the songs on the record, or if we were just going to pick out the ones that came out really good. But at the end of the day, we're just like, put them all on there. Fuck it. I mean, I know it could be a little bit much for some people, but, you know, weren't really thinking of it like that. We were just kind of like, just here it is.
Yeah, because how long had you been sitting on some of those songs for? Probably like a good little bit, right?
Yeah, they were like, I want to say maybe 1 or 2 songs on that record that were written before I was even in the band.
And I wonder, like, you know, with that, you kind of, to lack of a better phrase, you kind of like exhaust the vault. You get everything, you just put it out, and maybe that's kind of why the sophomore record sounds as different as it does to the debut. Yeah. I mean, you're basically just different people at that point in time. So you're, you know, and maybe some people are going the more extreme route. Some people are going off and doing other things musically or whatever. But I would have to imagine that's exactly kind of why that, all right, let's just start from scratch and see where it takes us.
I'm pretty sure that was our mentality at the time. We're just going to throw all this shit on the record, and then for the next one, we're just going to start almost like a new band, almost, not really, but a fresh slate. You know what I'm saying?
We talked a little bit about some of the music videos from, you know, these 2 albums that we talked about, especially the Acid Bath story with the Gator. But one particular music video that I've always wanted to know about, that you just happen to be a part of, from Equilibrium, the Crowbar record, I Feel the Burning Sun. This is like my favorite Crowbar song of all time. It's one of my favorite videos because it's definitely not like a hair metal video. You don't have like, you know, a bunch of guys with girls all around them. That's just dudes like kind of bellied up at the bar watching the Saints game. I love this video.
It's pretty much what's happening. Yeah.
And I mean, it's like, I don't know, like 25 years old at this point. Do you remember much about recording this music video? What can you tell me about Pat's Pub? Like, I want to know all about it.
Yeah, I remember it was a weeknight actually. And Kirk was like, well, come over. We're going to start shooting some shit for the video. It was like a Wednesday or something. It was like, we're going to shoot the video on Wednesday. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
We're shooting the video on Wednesday. So I'm like, cool. All right. So he's like, meet us in the practice room and we'll come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Because it was a friend of Kirk's that was shooting the video. That was just like one of his drinking buddies. I mean, he does great work, but there was like no real plan of what was happening. It's like, we're going to make a video. So we're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put all you guys in the practice room, and we're going to film you guys playing the song a few times. Then we're going to do some individual shots of you guys playing the song. Then we'll figure it out from there. So we did all that stuff in a matter of like 3 hours, okay? It was like fucking nothing. And I'm like, okay, what next? And then Kirk's like, well, fuck, let's just go to Pat's. And I'm like, it was like, dude, I gotta. This is when I was living in Thibodaux, Louisiana at the time.
Okay.
So it was like an hour for me to drive to New Orleans to get to the video shoot, and then an hour to drive back to Thibodaux. So I'm like, oh, and it was like maybe 10, 11 o'clock at this point at night. So I'm like, I know what's going to happen. So I'm going to sit this out, and you guys do what you got to do. So apparently that was when Jeff Okanowski was playing bass and Craig Nunebach was playing drums. And apparently they went to Pat's and were like, all right, just start filming. And they just were filming them hanging out in Pat's Pub.
That's awesome.
So I was like, yeah, totally. I know where this is going to lead, and I don't want any part of.
It takes a special kind of foresight to know exactly what you're getting into. If I walk through Pat's, I don't know where I'll wake up tomorrow.
It's not as bad as it used to be. Let's put it that way. Because at that point in time, when they were shooting that video, there were several bars within walking distance, and those bars would never close. Those bars would close when people left. So, yeah, the last I heard from the end of the shooting of that video was it went into the wee hours of the morning.
I believe that. It was
to where even the cameraman couldn't even hold up the camera anymore. Because they just stayed up drinking all fucking night and stuff. So
that's beautiful. I also like the story of you kind of joining too, where it's so matter of fact. You just knew instantly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were at a Pantera show backstage, and you just went like, "Hey, guess what? I'm your new guitar player," and that's it. It's such confidence.
That's when Todd Strange was playing bass.
Gotcha.
And me and Todd were pretty good friends, and I saw him at the Pantera concert, and basically Acid Bath had fucking completely dissolved at that point. And that's when I just said it jokingly. And I just went up to him and was like, hey, guess what? I'm your new guitar player. And he looks at me and goes, seriously? And I go, maybe. And he goes, and he says, go tell that to Kirk. And Kirk's standing right there. So I go up to Kirk and I'm like, hey, Todd told me to tell you I'm your new guitar player. And Kirk's like, well, give me your number. Take my number and I'll call you on Monday.
There you go.
And I'm like, all right. And then he called me and he was like, all right, you serious? I'm like, why not? Yeah. So he gave me a list of 5 songs to learn. He was like, come over, learn these songs, and come over on the weekend, and we'll jam and see what happens.
Yeah.
And it all worked out perfectly,
Yeah, it seemed like the process for getting you in the studio for or just working on Oddfellows Rest was pretty quick. So you got in where you could. It almost seemed like they had already been pretty heavily into recording the record.
Oh yeah, well, actually, when I joined, they were going into the studio like a week later.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so they're like, they had a recording of December Spawn and Planets Collide, like an actual, real nice demo versions of these songs. So he was like, okay, learn these songs and come over to my house next weekend, and I'll teach you as much of the other songs that I can. And that was it. Then we, at the last fucking minute before we went into the studio while we were rehearsing, we wrote I helped write Beyond the Black Horizon.
Yes. So that's certainly a song that, you know, they often credit you as with that main riff. Where did that main riff come from? Is it just through jamming, or was that one you kind of had in your back pocket? Like, what was going on with that one?
It was actually, believe it or not, it was supposed to be an Acid Bath riff that I was going to use on the third record, but it wasn't really like that. We made it more Saint Vitus-ish for the Crowbar stuff, but I'd written that for the third Acid Bath record that never really got used, or we never got the really chance to flesh it out, you know?
Yeah. We'll talk about a riff too that's like, it's pummeling. It's almost like hypnotic with like how that repetition. There's just something about like that good repetition where it's just literally beating you in the skull. And it's like, oh my God, I don't know how much more I can, like, this guy, it's heavy. It's so heavy.
I appreciate that. But yes, it's all Dave Chandler for St. Vitus's fault.
Oh damn, that reminds me of another Exit In show. What did Wino say to Dave?
Oh my God. He turned, like, we saw Wino we saw St. Vitus in 2012, right? When I think it was Lily 65 came out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And Wino turns around and looks at Dave and just goes, play the heavy one. Like, come on. Like, come on. Like, seriously. Like, play the heavy one. Okay.
That's all of them. Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. Play the heavy one. Hey.
Play the heavy. All right, we're playing the heavy one now.
Yeah.
The other thing we like to do on the show for sure is we love album liner notes. We love kind of doing deep dives on that. And there's a lot of like fun little nicknames on the record. We have, you know, for yourself, Sammy Satan, Jimmy Bauer as Wicked Cricket. You have T God Creep Strange. You also have a bunch of guests on this record. You have like fellow musicians and friends of the area. Big Ross Karpelman on keyboards.
Yeah.
How is he kind of related into the music scene?
He was playing organ, I would say, for this other project that Jimmy had called Clearlight.
Okay.
And that's more like a jam band kind of thing. But he was playing with them for a while, but he had added some keyboard stuff to Oddfellows Rest and Equilibrium. He did stuff on both those records. And he also played keyboards in a Christ Inversion as well.
How about Sid Montz on additional percussion? Who is Sid?
Sid Montz was basically a tech of ours that would come on the road and help out every now and then. He was a phenomenal drummer. He actually played drums on Equilibrium.
Gotcha. Okay.
So he would just come in and add, we would just go in there the wee hours of the morning with nothing to do and just hanging out with our friends, it's like, hey, you want to play something on this? And they're like, what? And I was like, I don't know. Go find something to play in the other room, put it on there.
So perhaps the name that has gotten the most head scratching moments between the three of us, Swindle, who is not here, he had to know. Swindle wanted me to beg me to ask you, who the fuck is Big Mike the Testicles?
That guy was a guy from Mississippi. Very, very. He's no longer with us, unfortunately.
R.I.P.
But he was a large gentleman, probably about 400 pounds, and but he had elephantitis of his testicles,
I was not expecting this to go
and
here.
he was proud of it. So it'd be like, and what we call him, his nickname was Big Daddy Rouge.
Sorry?
His nickname was Big Daddy Rouge. So it would just be something where he would just like and just drop his pants and show you these enormous testicles. Dude. Like they were fucking enormous, dude. So that was Mike, a guy from Mississippi that was morbidly obese. That had these morbidly obese testicles.
Man, just like a bag of grapefruits. Oh my God.
It was insane.
This is like some wild, like, when you said, let me sit down and let me tell you, it's like almost like a Paul Bunyan folklore tale or something, this guy from Mississippi.
But he actually did the background vocals on Planets Collide at the end.
Damn.
And, wow. So, yeah, but what we're actually going to do for the actual artwork on the actual disc of the CD, we're going to get a picture of his testicles and put it on the disc.
Yes.
That's
because I had, when I first saw Crowbar, before they were Crowbar, they were called the Slugs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
it was Kirk when Kirk was like bodybuilding, where he was fucking huge, okay. And then you had big sexy T, which T's fucking enormous, and they had Wayne Fabra that played drums for Necrophagia, and he's like another gigantic son of a bitch. And they were called the Slugs. Okay, so you had these three enormous guys playing this like slow doomy music before it was cool, and like Kirk would go on stage and say, "Yeah, we're the Slugs, and then we're gonna play slow, and if you don't like it, come tell us." I mean, you had these enormous fucking dudes, and I ain't gonna tell them shit. But anyway, they were called the Slugs, and they had a shirt on the back. It just said balls in big black letters. So they wanted to kind of recapture that thing with Mike and his enormous balls.
Oh man,
dude.
And put his enormous balls on the actual disc of the CD disc, like the artwork.
That's almost as good as Tad's
God's Balls record. Yeah. Man, that is. I was hoping the story would be something like this.
The record company kind of frowned upon us doing that, so that was that idea went out the window.
All these big wig record label guys really fucking it up for the rest of us.
I mean,
I agree with you.
Not only is the record heavy, like beyond sonic sound and everything, it's fucking weighty. Like literally, it's a weighty record. Like my God.
I also want to ask, is this how you got in contact with Keith Falgout? Is it Falgout or Falgout for the Goatwhore record?
No, actually, Keith Falgout had actually done the Acid Bath demo.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So we recorded the demo with him. He was a good friend of Jimmy Kyle, the drummer for Acid Bath. They were really good friends. I think Keith was actually from Morgan City, Louisiana, where Jimmy's from. And then Keith went to like a Full Sail recording studio in Orlando, Florida. And he had some free recording time due to his like scholarship or something. And was like, "Hey, you guys want to come record real quick?" And we're like, "Well, we don't have any money." So we scrounged all the money we could and got our asses to Orlando and recorded the demo. But Keith Falgo's been a friend of ours for a very long time. So, and he actually produced Pagan Terrorism Tactics as well.
Interesting. Okay. Got it. Okay, well, it's good to see where the connections are on. Everybody's on everything in this area. It seems
we're all friends, man.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, you mentioned Jimmy too. One of my favorite aspects of this record, I'm sure I'm speaking for Dylan too, is like there are Jimmy Bowerisms all over this thing too, where he's like just shouting something out or like, you know, doing whatever. I want to like, is there like just a tape like hours long of just Jimmy just shouting nonsense? I hope it exists.
Well, when he plays, for lack of a better term, sings while he's playing drums. So, when you mic a drum kit, you have everything close mic'd, and there's a couple of mics on the overheads to capture the cymbals. Jimmy's cymbals are about right here. Those mics are about right here. So when Jimmy's playing drums and it's going, you turn up those mics, and what do you hear?
Just
Jimmy Bauer singing. I think it's all in the gravity. I believe it is.
Yeah.
That's
where
it. Yep.
they fade out all the music except for the overhead mics, and you could hear Jimmy like moaning while he's playing drums.
So beautiful.
It's a lot of people do that and don't realize that they do that. Believe it or not, like when I do that when I'm tracking guitars as well. Because I remember I was tracking with Rutan one time. It was for God damn it. It was a song for Carving Out the Eyes of God. And it was a particularly fucking difficult part. And I was like, just normally I just hear my playback through the studio monitors in front of me, but this part was giving me so much fucking grief trying to play it. I was like, dude, give me some fucking headphones and just crank the shit out of it, and I think I'll be able to nail it if I just have it fucking loud as shit. So I start fucking tracking it, and I see Rutan kind of, and I'm like, I stopped playing, I took the headphones off, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, do you hear what you're doing? I'm like, yeah, I hear my playing. He's like, no, you're like humming while you're playing. I'm like, what? He's like, do it again. There was like another mic in the control room. So I'm playing it, and all you can hear is like the pick attack of the unplugged guitar with nothing comes through, and me going, So yeah, that's but anyway, Jimmy Bauer has that shit all over his goddamn drum tracks on fucking Oddfellows.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
All over.
I want that reissue in the future where it's just the outtakes of his fucking like whatever nonsense. Like
it would just have to be like the overhead mics of him just playing and just going.
It's funny that you said that it's all over the album, because I watched just randomly one evening, like I watched the Broken Glass video, and like he's tracking drums for the album. He's doing it on the recording of like them tracking that album. I went, there's no way he's not all over those mics on his tracks. Like they just had to bury him in there or something.
Studio magic sometimes.
There you go.
Luckily, they were only on some of the overhead mics that were closer to him. But yeah, that shit's all over that fucking record. This Jimmy fucking moaning and groaning and yelling.
I couldn't find too much about it. I saw a shirt online for the Nawlins Swamp Tour. Is that 1998?
Oh, geez. What's that, like Eyehategod, Solid Green, and Crowbar?
I'm assuming because, like the shirt I saw doesn't exactly signify like who was on the tour with you, but I would have to imagine just from some of the dates in New York City and some of the spots, like all of I think there was even, you guys maybe played Milwaukee Metal Fest that year and all sorts of shit.
Yes, it was Soylent Green, Eyehategod, and Crowbar.
Man,
that did a tour together, and we did it in the U.S. and we did it in Europe as well. It's one of those situations, to where if that happened nowadays,
oh man,
it would be a big deal.
Yeah,
but back then, nobody gave a shit.
Well, there was that. I saw like a flyer for like a 2-day. I don't know if you'd call it like a festival, but like a 2-day kind of back-to-back show at like CBGB's, where all three of you guys played, and it was like $10 a night. And I'm like, wow, like some of the names that are popping on here, this is insanity.
Yeah, that was like it was a fest. I think Buzz Oven, Anal Cunt was on it.
Yeah.
Crisis. It was a bunch of great bands. Yeah.
Was this maybe the show where you filled in for Eyehategod on vocals, perhaps?
No, I think Seth from Anal Cunt filled in that night.
Gotcha.
So you brought up CBGB's, like everybody's kind of got a CBGB story that was able to play it. What's Do you have a CBGB story about playing there?
The same story that everybody else has. I walked into the bathroom, I saw the toilet, and I walked out. It was just, I mean, it was a cool place. It was definitely, how can I describe it? Run down is a good way to put it. It's definitely seen its years. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it was just a small dive punk bar, you know what I'm saying, with a horrible fucking toilet.
Hey, we've all seen our fair share. Talk about the end, man.
Oh man, that's the one where you have to brace the door with your foot.
Oh,
so no
absolutely.
one comes in. Yep.
I feel like, yeah, I'd feel so claustrophobic.
There
in that
was you, Austin. You weren't around during this time, but Nashville had a venue called the Muse for a lot of years.
I played the Muse many times.
That is,
Hell yeah.
I thought it was a great venue. It sounded awesome. But the trick with all of my buddies was like, you can't use the bathroom at the Muse because like you'd go and there were bullet holes in the wall and like, you know, it's a venue bathroom. It's not the greatest, but it was like, oh no, I have to at least use it one time. Like I have to test my metal here.
What is it now? It's like
it's a Domino's.
It's a Domino's now.
It's a Domino's.
There was a secret bathroom, believe it or not.
Oh, that's even better.
Damn.
Yes, that you kind of had to go. Fuck. It was almost between the back of the stage. It was almost like a backstage bathroom, kind of, but it was still accessible to everybody. And like, not a lot of people knew it because it was like between the stage and the actual backstage. So it was like that little hallway thing before you went outside to go smoke. Yeah, there was a hidden bathroom that wasn't that terrible in that place.
This might be my new favorite aspect of the show, bathroom lore of like
no man,
venue.
the bane of my existence.
It's yeah. I've been to a few shows to like at the New Daisy Theater in Memphis, and it is like I still have flashbacks about like I saw Cannibal Corpse there when I was like 16. Nightmarish shit in that bathroom. You know, it was a Cannibal Corpse, Dying Fetus, Necrophagist, and Unmerciful, all on tour together. And this was like maybe one of the first tours for Kill. And I remember 16 years old. I basically grew up in a small town and like going and seeing that bathroom, and it was just it looked like a murder scene. It looked like a Fulci film. Like it was terrifying.
You became a man that day.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, you run into some gross ones every now and then.
So one question I typically ask every guest, Sammy, is if you were approaching a new fan that had never heard any of the bands you were in, heard any of the music you had performed, what would be the song or songs that you would give to that person to listen to perfectly describe each act that you were in?
Fuck, man. One song?
Oh, one song or songs from each group.
I would have to see what kind of person this is.
Okay.
It would depend on what type of person. If he seems like he's borderline serial killer-ish, I would definitely introduce him to Goatwhore first. If he was really into drugs or anything, I would definitely introduce him to Acid Bath and Crowbar first.
When you're receiving your accolades at the Hall of Fame, for extreme metal, which I'm sure they're building at this very moment. Is there a riff that you're particularly proud of? Like, fuck, that was one that I'm like, I was on it that day for sure.
Fuck, man, that's a hard one.
Yeah, sorry, or you could be multiple.
It would probably be the thing that everybody would expect is the opening riff to Apocalyptic Havoc.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
a good one. It's a good pick.
That's a doozy. It's simple but effective.
Yeah, it's a gut feeling. It's that kind of internal shit that you can't describe to anybody. It's indescribable. As you hit on this earlier, Sammy, you hear a riff and you just fucking know. Like you don't even have to explain to anybody. You just fucking know. And if you can look at your buddy that's standing there with his beer in his hand and you just make eye contact there for a minute, it's like you fucking know. Like it doesn't even take physical movement, anything. It's ingrained in you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's when you know the shit's good,
Yeah.
When it just makes you make that face.
That's it.
That face, you know, that face.
I guess I want to ask, you guys are, you mentioned Ringworm. Whenever I look forward to a Goatwhore record, a Ringworm record, I know I'm going to be in for a treat. You guys are like always kind of, I would say you guys are consistent but also keep pushing forward. What can we look forward to maybe in 2024? What are we looking, maybe even in the next couple of years? What do you hope to accomplish going forward now that, this album's out? You've kind of wrapped up touring for this album. What do fans have to look forward to for the Goatwhore camp?
Well, we're going to try to do a little bit more touring this year.
Okay.
It probably not hit it as hard as normal because we want to start concentrating on writing a new record.
Perfect.
Which we have a lot of pretty much almost finished. It's like we just have maybe a couple of the songs left to write. So it'll probably be out sooner than later.
That's awesome to hear, man. I'm really stoked for it. I guess the last question I have for you would be, I mentioned earlier with the recent tour, I feel like you guys are a big champion of taking out younger bands. You are avid fans of the scene. Are you perhaps listening to anything right now? Is there maybe a younger group or the next class of musicians that you feel like maybe people should be looking out for?
Man, you caught me at a bad time because I mean, right now I've just been listening to not really checking out new stuff, just kind of selling back into the old stuff like Celtic Frost and Judas Priest and Bathory and Venom, Motorhead, just kind of not really looking out for anybody new per se that like I should be, but I'm like, I just want to listen to my old man music, but there is, I think I would say, as far as a newer band that I think is surprisingly amazing that everybody should probably give a listen to, that you probably either you're going to like it or you're not, is a band called Cults des Ghoules. And they have a record called Hembane. Start with that record. I suggest everyone start. I wouldn't say they're a newer band. I think they've maybe been around for maybe 5-10 years or so. To me, that's a newer band. But that record, I was listening to that record last night actually, and that is a very underrated record in my opinion.
I can't wait to check it out. This is going to be great.
All I can tell you is listen to it with the lights on. You'll see what I mean.
Well, dude, I can't thank you enough for joining us and maybe answering some questions about our trilogy. It has really been an honor to kind of talk to you and pick your brain about some of this stuff, man. I really appreciate it.
Man, thank you guys for having me, man.
Absolutely. Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven is out now. If you haven't checked it out, don't be a stooge. It's out there. It's great. It's full of riffs. That's what we're talking about on this show. Thank you so much for Dylan, Sammy. You've been listening to Riff Worship. See ya.
Stay evil.
See ya.
Stay.